morning, Viewpoint, a program of personalities, politicians, and perspectives. Co-host today this morning, we just brought in off the street Judith K. Busby. And good morning, my dear.
Hi there.
We will have certainly something serious to talk about, so it won't be personalities and it won't be political. Although I did hear a fellow by the name of Henry Cate III, you know, old Henry III, whoever he was. He said the problem with political jokes is that they get elected.
Well, yeah, you got that right.
Something to be said for that. Kudos. Well, I start Viewpoint with a kudo or two, folks, and I'd just like to step up and swing a bat for David Lanterman for bringing in two of the all-time movie classics, Singing in the Rain and Casablanca. And we went yesterday and did a little, relive a little musical history, movie history. They're on the way on for, I think, today and tomorrow. I think it's all over. If you want to see two of the all-time greats, the storyline in Singing in the Rain is pretty trite, pretty fluffy, but boy, there's some sense in there. So it's a really fun show. So we've got a serious discovery. So why don't you introduce our guest, Mrs. Busby, and we'll take it from there.
I would be proud to do that. And they are serious, let me tell you.
Yeah, no kidding.
They aren't kidding. We have three people from Elkhart, two whose families have been there for generations, and a newcomer who's only been there 40 years, and that be Lyle Fout. And Lyle is the village president. And with him are Whitney Pasquesi, and she just completed her degree in environmental studies at the University of Illinois, and Gillette Ransom, who we've had before, and she is mostly interested in the historic / tourism angle of the issue in Elkhart that I'm sure we're all aware of.
The elephant in the room.
The elephant in the room. Yeah. That is Viper Mine and the fly ash question. It seems that the City Water, Light, and Power in Springfield has a lot of fly ash that has to be put someplace, and they want to put it in Elkhart. And I venture to say most of us aren't familiar with fly ash or what you do with it or what happens to it.
Or what it is. But
we're going to learn about that today. And if you have any questions or comments on this issue, our number is 648-5510. Feel free to participate. And who would like to kick it off? Lyle, since you're the president of the village, would you like to say what the village perception of this idea is?
Madam Interlocutor, could I interrupt just a minute and ask a question? Maybe we ought to define, and we'll pass this question to Ms. Pasquesi, fly ash.
Yes.
Maybe we ought to define that to set the tone. Then we get right back to Lyle. Go right ahead, please, Whitney.
Fly ash is the residue that's left behind after coal is burned. And the reason that it's a concern is because it contains concentrated levels of heavy metals, which are toxic, including arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury. And so it's a concern to us because it can pollute groundwater, it can blow in the air and cause health problems, and even though it's mixed with other coal refuse, the weight by volume is considerable amount of fly ash.
So that's the junk they purport to drop in our backyard. And now let's go to your question with Lyle, Judith K.
Our concern is the well proximity to the mine. It sits right at the corner of their property, about 30 feet away. And it's approximately 135 feet deep. And it's the main source of water for the village. It serves as 180 gallons a minute, the main water source. We do have another well that's in town. It's behind the well, but it doesn't produce near the water capacity as the well at the mine.
Maybe you should mention the aquifer.
Yeah, and the aquifer, the mine sets on the Muhammad Aquifer, which it's a considerable amount of area from Muhammad to, it just covers a wide area.
Central Illinois.
Illinois. So there's more people that are affected by the aquifer than just Elkhart. But they do draw water from the aquifer and a well that they pump to Williamsville for their facility.
The Board of
Appeals.
the Board of Appeals for zoning has met and passed their decision on, and they pass it on to the Logan County Board. Now, what are you hearing? Well, first explain what the Board of Appeals found and what they're going to tell the county board.
The Board of Appeals found that the vote, there was 3 zoning board members, and they had to all vote for it. 2 of them voted for it, and 1 of them voted against it, so it didn't pass. So they're going to tell the county board that it didn't pass. So then it turns over to the county board.
Which in the end means what?
They, I guess, disapprove of the zoning, rezoning.
They don't want to rezone that.
Right.
Okay. Now, Gillette Ransom, your position comes from the area of tourism and the beauty of the hill.
Which it is.
Yes, most certainly. So tell us of your position on this.
Well,
The historic value as well.
Right. Well, the hill and the whole Elkhart area is really a concentrate of a tremendous multi-layers of history, which are not just local. I mean, we have had presidents, Abraham Lincoln, Governor Richard Oglesby, who was 3-time not consecutive governor of the state of Illinois. We've had Captain Bogartis wing shot, who shot in front of Queen Victoria in England. I mean, this is a huge...
And the cattle king of the world.
And the cattle king. I should not neglect to mention my great-great-grandfather.
That's what you say. That's for the history,
and
kid.
Whitney's great-great-great-grandfather. So it is tremendous. We have a tremendous amount of history, and every family in the village, of course, has their own history as well, but it is history that is interesting and sought after by the traveling public. So tourism, which links very handily with history, is the issue. And the loss of anything or anything that threatens things like the village water supply, which would be devastating, is very critical to us.
Most certainly. People, if you'd use those headsets, we have a phone call, and they will tell you over the headset what their
Judith and I will share this headset, and I think at this point in time we can go ahead, please, caller.
Good morning. My name is
Good morning.
Diaz. Hello.
Yes, that's better. Volume up a little bit.
My name is Peter Diaz, and we have the horse feathers and wild hair restaurant business in Elkhart. We depend very heavily on tourists which are attracted to the area because of Route 66. And we have had visitors from 47 states and 44 different countries all over the world. This does just not mean one person. Sometimes these parties consist of up to 10 or 15 people. We're talking literally hundreds of people. We continually, every year, visit our restaurant and facility in Elkhart. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. We appreciate that very much. You know, it's interesting. He alluded to something that is really a kind of a phenomenon to this old fellow is, and I've seen it here at the Lincoln College Museum, register where people sign in, and I've stopped in frequently at the Palms Cafe up the line here in Atlanta, and I just, out of curiosity, flip the pages on the folks who sign in. It's remarkable that this Route 66 mystique is obviously the answer, and from the world over, an incredible number of Europeans, and so there's a real, very, very significant tourist factor there, tourism factor,
And Japanese as well.
Yeah.
Orientals.
with their cameras.
Everybody. Yeah, it isn't just
And we met a
Europeans.
carload of Norwegians one time.
Yeah.
At one time, it seems to me, I read that in the days of yore, when the Indians were the population, that they would get up on Elkhart Hill, and from there they could see over the miles of prairie grass toward Peoria to chart their course. So that hill has been significant to more than just the recent population, certainly.
No, we still have portions of Edwards Trace, which was in fact that original pioneer and eventually turned into a county road that goes from Cahokia to Peoria, and it crosses Elkhart Hill. It
Well-
has been that kind of thing for eons.
Eons, right. Whitney, what's your position on this? Because you approach it from a scientific
Yes.
side. Let's talk a little bit about your studies on the facts.
My studies, as was mentioned before, I majored in environmental studies, and so I have studied the health effects of toxic fly ash and also the environmental effects. And my concerns with the health effects are that the EPA has found that if you live near a unlined compound fly or slurry pond, that your chances of getting cancer increase to 1 in 50, which is 2,000 times higher than the EPA recommended standards. And even though mines claim to take safety precautions and line the ponds, engineers will tell you that all of those liners do eventually fail. It's not a question of if they fail, it's a question of when. And the mine facility sits over a sand and gravel aquifer, which provides water for the county and for surrounding areas. And also the proposed site is adjacent to the Lake Fork Ditch, which flows into larger water systems such as Lincoln Lakes. So my concern is that if there is a breach in the compound, whether it be from a weather event or a flood event or just time, that it could endanger the water quality and the health of surrounding areas. So that's the main concern.
And we do have a fault
Yes.
that is close to this, which I should think would be a factor that they would want to take into consideration.
Yes. And you'd think that they would want to take into consideration possible earthquakes and the fact that the proposed site is right in the path of the last 3 tornadoes have gone in that general direction. And so if they haven't planned for a breach like high winds or excessive flooding or tornadoes, then anything could happen in that site, and that poses a risk to the town.
You mentioned the cancer risk, and we're already behind the 8 ball because Logan County has the highest incidence of cancer in the state. So we're already behind the 8 ball. Now then you raise this. You mentioned that it was an unlined reservoir, that this would be an issue that would release this, what do you call it, slag or what?
Slurry, slag.
That would release this compound. But what about lined? Have they shown you the engineer's drawing of what it is that they intend to put there, so that
They gave us a map of what they intend to put there, and it's 2 large coal refuse sites, and they define coal refuse as, the clay and the bits of particles that come out of the ground, the soils, and they haven't said whether or not they would put fly ash in it, but most sites do in some point or another. And the sites, the data that has proposed for the cancer risk is mostly from unlined ponds, and they have claimed that they're going to line it with a HEPA-approved liner, but they have said in the past, many engineers have said that those liners do eventually fail. So.
Well, ultimately, I'm sure that must be way down the road. But the other evening, I went down to the hearing at Elkhart, and the only reason I went down is I tried to be a little more knowledgeable about the subject for this morning's discussion, and I was glad I did. I found a number of folks. Oh, by the way, if you're going to testify down there or make comments, you had to have a little swearing-in ceremony. which was kind of interesting.
To swear you in to tell the truth?
Yeah,
or?
That's we're going to tell the truth, the whole truth.
We're into truth in
Yeah, right.
Illinois, you know.
There's a factor there that I don't think I want to go near right now. But I heard some very cogent remarks. I heard some impassioned pleas. And by the way, just as a kudo, kind of a quick aside, I thought the young lady who stood up on the part of the mine, who was an employee of the mine, I took my hat off to her. It was she exposed herself by standing up there in front of all those people and making kind of an impassioned plea. You had to give her credit for having the moxie to do that. And so I took my hat to her for that regard. But the thing that I didn't realize that came out to me, Lyle and ladies, is this is not the Elkhart waste. This waste is waste. So it's really not an immediate Elkhart problem.
No.
We're not having our own in-house problem. We're having waste from other areas. The question begs to me,
How did they come up
why in the
with
world
Elkhart?
would we be taking care of somebody else's problems? And it's called money, I think. They probably get a fair amount of money
Well, they
for
said it's from
handling
their
somebody's
customers.
waste products.
They said it comes from their customers that they sell the coal to, and they have to get rid of the ash. And they have to put it somewhere. I know City Water, Light and Power is at the max. The gentleman that spoke there said that they're full on the other side, so they have to find a place for it.
Well,
How did
Well-
they happen to come up with Elkhart?
There's already a coal mine there.
because the mine is there and there's a place they already
And they own
already have a
some
dumping site.
Acreage.
I thought it was very interesting that they're asking Logan County to take waste from that we don't produce. The other thing that impressed me is the size of the impoundment, some 300 plus acres, and to me that was very significant. 300 acres is a lot of ground, folks.
Now, it'll cover the whole west, or the east side of the hill when you come up on it from Mount Pulaski. So,
Which goes back to Gillette's hypothesis too, that it will impact the view for a lot of tourism, lots of tourism, as Peter pointed out. And there are a lot of folks that use that Mount Pulaski Elkhart Blacktop going over to the historical areas in Mount Pulaski, and it sure will be a pretty sight for them to see that.
and I do know there's some new houses up on the subdivision up there that'll be affected
Oh my!
tremendously.
You know,
It's interesting,
sorry.
excuse me, Judy, that the route, if you take County 10 up over Elkhart Hill, going east, and you go to 800, which is the intersection that kind of frames where this new proposed site is going to be. In fact, it is the same route that the Logan County Regional Planning Commission picked on their Greenways plan to be an economic boon and a conservation area protecting wildlife and flyways and all kinds of things for migrating waterfowl. This was in their plan that was passed and adopted by the Logan County Board, the City of Atlanta, the City of Mount Pulaski, the City of Lincoln, and the Village of Elkhart in 2006. Most recently, the Logan County Regional Planning Group apparently supported this mine request. And you wonder, what has happened since 2006?
goodness knows.
648-5510. Somebody might have a comment or question for Lyle Fout. Whitney,
Pasquesi.
I know that all along.
I knew you did. It was Bill said it
just
funny
checking.
once. I said, Bill,
And Gillette
who
Ransom.
is that? And Bill says, how soon do you have to know? And I think we're all aware that that kind of thing happens to each and every one of us, probably even you, Whitney, and you're a bit younger.
Well, I've known Whitney's family for, I can't tell you how many years anyway, because that would date me a little bit. It just seems to me that I go back to my original hypothesis is taking somebody else's waste and dumping it in our backyard. And that just on the face of it doesn't seem right. I don't think Judy'd like it if I took my trash into her backyard as close as we are.
Not so much.
One other, whoops.
Oh, we have another call,
Oh.
please. Hang on just 1 minute, sir, while we all
Everybody
adjust
get
our
your
headsets.
equipment.
Yeah. All right, go right ahead, please, caller.
Hello, my name is Mona Moss. I live in Elkhart. I wanted to thank our representatives there for trying to get the word out on this serious issue. I've been to the hearings and I've heard what Arch Cole had to say from the mine, and I just want to reinforce that we don't want anyone to lose their jobs. It seems so completely illogical that this pond would be placed right outside a beautiful hill, that everyone's so worried about the jobs. Arch Cole had to back off that, they're going to close the mine and they're going to lose 300 jobs, because it's just not true. We know coal ash has to go somewhere, but it's not logical to put it over this aquifer and destroy the little jewel that we have here in the hill. We've got to find a better place for this pond, and everybody can keep working, and we can all get along. So, thank you.
Ms. Mock, thank you very much for your input. We appreciate that very much. Well, here again, you see, there's an expression known as NIMBY, not in my backyard. Well, generically, that sometimes fits. Well, it's they're too prejudiced, so it's because it's in their backyard. But facts are facts, and this doesn't become a NIMBY factor. This is a community factor. We all will feel the effects of this in this entire area if this is allowed, and if it's going to come down to, as I best understand it, Mrs. Busby, to the vote of the county board as to whether or not they will allow this.
And that is tomorrow evening in the third floor courtroom at the Logan County Courthouse. At what? That's at 7, isn't it?
But this is just a workshop tomorrow night.
The final
Not a
vote
final
isn't
vote.
until the 21st.
We're going to have a final break here before we move on with the program, because we have what's known as commercials, and it's a NIMBY factor there, boy. They want their commercials. All right, ahead, please. Right back live in the studio here at Viewpoint. My co-host Judy Busby, our guest this morning, Ransom, Whitney Pasquesi, and Mayor of Elkhart, Mr. Lyle Fout. We appreciate your making this trip up here, folks, to talk about this very, very important subject. And as we talked off air, maybe a little bit on there. I forgot. What day is it? This impact is not on just Elkhart and Elkhart alone. This is an impact on all of Logan County, and that's exactly what it will be, particularly if at some point down the road there's a breach, and as Pasquesi said, it's not if, it's when, and it gets into the aquifer. We're all in deep trouble. Won't be my trouble, I'll be out of here, but nonetheless, it'll be a serious matter. I don't want to make light of that. So, and we've had some interested people call in. We appreciate their input. Lyle, as a mayor of Elkhart, have you had a lot of pressure?
Oh, not really pressure, just a lot of phone calls.
Input.
Yeah, just voicing their opinion.
Mm-hmm.
That's about all.
Let's address the tax issue, because we're all the same. Our ears are directly connected to our wallets. Let's talk about the tax issue. What does it mean to the county of Logan?
Well, we have no tax base. I mean, there's no tax brought back to Logan County. Their customers pay no taxes, like City Water, Light and Power, ADM. That's two examples. The one tax and customer, they moved on to a different supplier, so there's no tax. I mean, there's just no sales tax on any of the coal.
Income to Logan County then from the Viper mine is
The real estate tax on the real estate.
On the real estate. Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And I suspect they're rather significant. And I have no, we could all look it up.
I don't know what the
It's not
difference between
public
agriculture
record.
and industrial is.
I don't have any idea.
It's not my-
Gillette, you're particularly interested in the length of time that the mine will have as its responsibility, this fly ash accumulation that will be there in perpetuity. It's not going to just evaporate
It
or
won't
anything.
fly away.
Yeah, it's a non-flying fly ash.
Right. Originally, the mine timeline was to be about 25 years, after which the reclamation process was going to supposedly take place. And at the end of 25 years, the mine has now been there for 32. At the end of 25 years, in fact, the coal seam did finish off, and they moved the whole operation, except for the washing and the dump, which they left in Elkhart. But the mining operation moved to Sangamon County. It's just over the county line, and a conveyor belt now brings all the coal from what is the Williamsville mine back to Elkhart for processing, and that is where all the fly ash returns to. Now, they have another 25 years at the Williamsville site. They can dig coal all the way to the Sangamon Valley. At the end of that, they will probably close. And the point is that a mine's life expectancy, if it does not move, is generally 25 years. When the mine leaves, they leave behind all the waste, if that's where the waste has been taken. The waste stays forever. The ground that it sits on remains unusable forever and becomes the responsibility of the area that it is in.
That'd be us.
That would be Logan County. And when, after 5 years, the mine stops testing the wells, the test water wells around it, they're gone.
And the financial responsibility then, if something would happen to misfire, would be totally on the county.
It would be a tremendously expensive cleanup if anything went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Something
I mean,
just,
it may not even be possible to clean it up, but if it were, it would be tremendously costly.
an issue that I just found out in an off-air conversation a few minutes ago is that they're not actively mining coal at the Elkhart site now. That is a processing plant as opposed to actually bringing coal out of the ground there at the Elkhart site. The coal that comes out at the Williamsville site down there is transported by conveyor, which is a
5.5 miles.
5.5 miles. Rather interesting piece of engineering, I always thought when they did that. Back up here to be processed and washed and whatever, and then it's trucked out of there. That kind of a mind-boggling concept. So, now what about, has there been any subsidence experience so far? Are there any areas of
You can speak.
True
Whitney, your
subsidence.
farm, I mean, on the farms right around the well, you can see low spot. There's wet.
that
ponds
previously
that
were not?
stand.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're just,
Mm-hmm.
they're out in the fields, and there's just, you can't say it's subsidence, but there's an effect on the ground.
Well, it's almost axiomatic to think that if you're going to undermine something, something's going to sink somewhere, sometime down the road. That's a duh factor, isn't it?
Yeah.
Whitney, Pasquesi, why don't you address that and other environmental impacts?
Okay. The subsidence issue, the proposed site, supposedly one of the reasons that they chose that site is because that particular site has not been undermined. So for safety reasons, they think that's a better site. But the rest of the environmental concerns are because of the proximity of the proposed site to a dedicated nature preserve and That is the highest level of protection that a land can receive in the state of Illinois. The only way that that land can ever be touched is by an executive order of the governor. And the reason that that land was dedicated that way is because it's biologically and ecologically important. It's a stopover for migratory waterfowl, and it is the only open water source. The pond that's directly adjacent to the proposed site is the only open water source for all the wildlife that lives on Elkhart Hill and migrates through the area. So from an ecological perspective, that could be devastating if that land was all converted and put that close to toxic fly ash. It could wreak havoc on the ecosystem and the surrounding environment.
Well, Ms. Pasquesi, in your testimony down there, you stated that the Environmental Protection Agency has formally identified over 100 cases of drinking water contamination from coal ash toxins, and 2/3 of the coal ash dump sites resulted in groundwater contamination.
That is true.
That's a significant factor.
It's significant and it's frightening, and the fact that that continues to happen in many sites all across the country, especially in Illinois, which is the leading state for coal ash facilities in the nation. And that is a concerning factor to me because, as we all know, the EPA is limited in their resources, it's limited in their funds. So monitoring all those wells and checking on it is not necessarily something they can do to the vigilance that we need to make sure that our lands and water is protected.
Question just occurs. Excuse me, Judy. Go right ahead, please. No, it just occurred to me. Has anybody flown over and taken a from the air site of the present dump site and how pretty that is?
Not too
Well, it's a thought.
Get an aerial photo.
You might want to get an aerial
It's
shot.
about a 20-acre lake.
Yeah. Well, you might want to get an aerial shot and present that because it ain't pretty, folks.
I know Whitney stated on the well factor that they're tested. The city wells tested every day, 7 days a week.
Uh-huh.
And you know that, don't you?
Because I do it. And then once a month, all the results are taken to the EPA, and then we get final analysis from them on paperwork. We file that at the city hall.
Mm-hmm.
So I know ours is monitored every single day.
For instance, West Virginia, and down in that area, there's an awful lot of coal mining. Surely coal begets fly ash. Would that be a fair thing to
Wherever
say?
it's processed.
The burning of coal begets fly ash. After it's burned, fly ash is the residue that's left behind, and the reason it's a problem is because it concentrates the heavy metals when it's burned, so it increases toxicity. And fly ash actually produces 100 times more radiation than a nuclear power plant that would produce the same level of energy. So fly ash is not only toxic, it's also radioactive, which is scary to me.
How did I live to be so old? We had fly ash in our house when we burned coal.
We are all aware that the residents of Elkhart and surrounding areas are certainly emotionally involved with this question.
Rightfully so.
But how about the rest of us? I mean, it's not that Bill and I and Jim, just because we live in Lincoln, are going to be exempt from any of the fallout that would come from this. Isn't that true?
Yes, I think that's true. And I think when it comes down to it, it's a human rights issue, because why should we have to give up our quality of life and our knowledge that we can live in a safe place where we have safe water and clean air and our children can live there and grow up there and be healthy? Why should we have to give that up for a mine that gives nothing back to our community? They don't pay us anything. They just want to dump their refuse there and refuse from other places and then move on. And to me, that just seems like an issue that is a human rights issue, and we should stand up for ourselves.
Now, this 300 plus acres, is that owned outright by the mine? It's not leased from anybody.
It's
owned.
just been purchased.
So it's theirs to do with what they please, except that they have to conform to environmental concerns and so forth.
Now, tomorrow night, when the county board meets for their work session, this will be presented to them. And actually, the work goes on at the work session. The actual voting session is pretty well decided before they get to that step. So, are you looking for a big crowd tomorrow night at the courthouse?
I believe there will be. Part of our concern was that in many cases it appeared as though even before hearing both sides of the story, it seemed to us that many people on the different governmental agency boards had already made their decision to go with the mine. And we thought, boy, even in a court of law, the jurors are instructed to remain impartial until they heard both sides. And so that was a concern, and we're hoping that the workshop tomorrow evening will be available to hear both sides of the story before decisions are made.
Yes.
We can hope that.
And you're right, Gillette. There are three sides to everything: your side, my side, and the truth.
Right.
Now, when you get to this meeting, what would be the presentation on the part of the Viper Mind? What did they say to you at the hearings you had in Elkhart? What's their position?
Well,
I mean, why did they decide on Logan County other than that they own 320 some acres?
I think for this current expansion, what their reasoning was it was the cheapest and the easiest expansion because they already owned the land. If they had to go elsewhere and look, and they finally did admit that there were alternatives that they had not even checked into yet that were possible, but it was because of the proximity, the fact that there was already a dump, so to speak, and a slurry pond there, that they went with the Elkhart site.
Well, in defense of them, who probably need no defense, they've got to put this thing someplace, and I suppose nobody is going to warmly welcome the idea.
Well,
Really?
If there is money to be made accepting fly ash, there may be some enterprising place in the state of Illinois that would like to make some money.
But it looks to me like from our position that it's not going to be a money maker but a money loser, because after 5 years, the whole burden is on the county of Logan.
Well, the money, obviously, if there is money to be made accepting fly ash, would be being channeled into Viper Mine's pocket.
Well,
Mr.
they're in a
Mayor,
nice
when you
position.
signed on to serve the folks in your community, did you anticipate that you might have this elephant in your room?
No, not really.
No, I would imagine so.
You mean you're blindsided?
Yes.
Well,
On a phone call to rent use the town hall for a zoning meeting, and then it bumped up to the old school.
yeah. Well, fortunately, you had that place. Thank goodness it didn't go to the wrecking ball.
Yes.
Certainly needed it
Yes.
there. We appreciate the presence of Whitney Pasquesi and Gillette Ransom and Mr. Mayor Lyle Fout this morning to talk about a very, very serious subject. What will have a lasting impact on the county, whichever way it goes. Hopefully, it'll be a positive, lasting impact. We always try to close the subject of the day with something that's relevant to this discussion. It's marginally relevant if you consider the beauty of Elkhart Hill. And poet John Keats once said, the poetry of the earth is never dead. Think about Elkhart Hill and think about that expression. You might have been right about that. Thank you, folks, for Viewpoint. Thank you very much.